A common misconception in the world of file transfer is that by simply using secure protocols like SFTP or implementing a managed file transfer solution means automatic compliance. In today's episode of The Transfer Files, I'm sitting down with James Lewis to discuss what compliance means in practice and how MFT plays a part in a much bigger picture, especially when it comes to different industries with very different requirements. Enjoy the episode. James, how are you?
I'm very good, Steph.
Good. I'm very well, thank you. I am glad to be back in the studio. We have had a makeover.
Looks lovely.
For this season, yeah. I'm excited.
Looks like a next directory.
We're going to be saying that to all our guests that come on.
Yes.
It could be in a catalogue.
Yeah, we'll have to be careful not to wear anything too beige.
No.
Morph into the background.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're good. I'm excited for all of the episodes that we have to come.
Indeed.
And all of the guests that we have to come.
We've got some amazing guests.
We do indeed.
We do.
But today it's just you and I thought we could talk a little bit about compliance. It comes up a lot, I think.
It's a dry topic, isn't it?
We're going to make it really interesting and
Great.
fun.
I'll do my best.
And something I mentioned in the intro was that personally I feel that there is that misconception out there that by just having an MFT solution means you've ticked a box, you're compliant, when actual reality is there's more to it than that. But firstly, why do organisations maybe think that? Do you feel that they think that too?
Well, let's start with what compliance is.
Mm-hmm.
And there's various types of compliance, I guess. So what we're not talking about here is we're not talking about compliance within an organisation. So you're not compliant with an internal operational process, for example, or service level agreement that you might need for a client. What we're talking about here is compliance with industry regulations, so compliance such as ISO, PCI DSS, DORA, ITAR, all these lovely acronyms, not acronyms, but I guess they are acronyms, aren't they? That proliferates the IT world. Why do people feel they're compliant when they bought something? It could be a number of different things. It could be that they have they've looked at the vendor's website and they see that buying a particular product X gives them a tick in a box for PCI compliance, for example, and just simply by putting something in, they think that box is ticked. But MFT is just an enabler fundamentally, and unless it is configured to a particular organization's requirements specific to the compliance regulations and mandates that exist inside their industry, then it really is just a piece of software. And furthermore, I think that one of the sort of bigger challenges is that certainly in larger organizations, there'll be an IT function and the responsibility will sit with IT to deliver a lot of this, certainly from a technology standpoint. There may also be, and quite often with the larger organizations, a compliance function, which will look at internal compliance, but also be aware of and lead on external compliance, that compliance that affects and impacts that organization in that industry. So one of the key things there is making sure that the compliance function works alongside and hand in hand with the IT function to ensure that a piece of software isn't just a piece of software, it's actually there to do a particular job.
Yeah. So how does that look? So managed file transfer alone doesn't make you compliant. It's, as you say, the way you set it up.
Yeah.
What sort of things are you then, what role does it play? How do you need to configure it in order to be compliant? Is that a valid question?
Yes and no. So, I mean, an MFT piece of software is a bit like a toolbox. It's got lots of things in it that you can enable, disable, use, make use of, if you so wish. So it really depends upon the type of compliance that affects your industry, and it may well be that there's multiple types of compliance. It's really MFT is one of those tools that can make an organisation, or certainly enable an organisation, to be compliant, and without it, you're probably going to struggle. more often than not, if you're in a regulated industry or an industry that has compliance around it. One of the ways in which I talk about an organization, one of our customers, is that no organizations these days are an island. They all have the requirement to do business with other organizations, otherwise they fundamentally wouldn't exist. So they have suppliers and they have customers. So they'll have a supply chain. Within that supply chain, each of those individual organizations probably has their own set of compliance standards. It may well be that they all within one industry and they all have a similar set of compliance regulations. So to answer your question, I think to be compliant, it's not as simple as just installing the software and getting away with it, or heading off with it. It's a case of trying to make sure that it's configured in a particular way.
Yeah. And how important is something like visibility and reporting when it comes to auditing and compliance?
Visibility and reporting is probably one of the key features of MFT, which will help with compliance, but it is not. It's not the only feature, obviously, within the software. Visibility and reporting can also, or the MFT tool, certainly from the point of view of visibility and reporting, can interact with a variety of other tools that an organization has in place that will enable the organization to extend that visibility and reporting. We're talking about some of the tools that we sell, such as the activity monitor, the BAM solution from Acom. There are SIEMs that we can integrate with. There's analysis reporting tools. So there's a lot of different things that we can interact with as well to enhance that posture.
Yeah. And how easy is it to show that you are compliant?
It's some compliance is one of those things that is largely is about processes and documenting processes and making sure that you've adhered to those processes, because the process has been written in such a way to ensure you remain within compliance. So the software, the configuration of the software can be easily accessed to see whether you've followed the process that's been set. But once again, the data from within these systems can be automatically ported into a variety of different systems to aid with that visibility too.
And moving on to industries, which you've briefly mentioned industries, and it's safe to say that compliance isn't a one-size-fits-all necessarily. Mm-hmm. Protocol work with a number of industries. We've seen our fair share of everything from healthcare, finance, government. They're all sort of subject to different compliance legislations. Starting with healthcare, for example, I understand they've got HIPAA in the US, which is all about protecting patient data, very, very sensitive data. And then in the UK, you've got the likes of GDPR. With that level of scrutiny and sensitivity when it comes to their data, how important is MFT to those organizations, and what role is it playing in helping them meet compliance? So
how important is it? I would argue very important. So you look at the type of data that we're talking about here. And in fact, there's two ways of answering this question. So if you look at PHI, personal healthcare information, then as it's called largely in the States under HIPAA, that information is probably about as sensitive as you can get.
Yeah.
I know we're going to come on to a different industry sector in a minute, so which also has extremely sensitive data. But when it comes to the sensitivity of data, then healthcare data is pretty much there as the number one. How organizations handle that data within the healthcare sector, specifically in the United States, is extremely highly regulated, more so than it is really here in the UK. And then what you find is things like the HIPAA and HITECH, which are both US compliance and regulatory sort of frameworks, flow through to the UK, but aren't necessarily mandated. So they do have very sort of strict requirements about how data is handled, and the process whereby an organisation needs to go through a review and an audit of what it is that it does and what controls it needs to put in place from a compliance perspective. Then, in theory, what tools that organisation should use to ensure the safety and security of that very sensitive data.
Yeah.
That aside, because that's really the majority of the personally identifiable data, or the PHI data. But a healthcare organisation is much the same as every other organisation we deal with. They all have an HR function. They all have a marketing function. They all have legal functions and finance functions. They all move highly sensitive data around. So there are those almost business as usual processes that exist inside organisations. Then we find that sort of a subset or a different side to the coin that is what that business does within that industry that needs to secure a different type of data. And then that's sort of where the compliance and regulations sit. So when it comes to things that you'd want to put in place and features, I guess, that are appropriate within an MFT solution, it's standard stuff. So it's the securing of the data in transit, securing the data at rest, and really focusing in on sort of role-based access control. So who can get access to the data? Where is it stored? And why is it stored there and for how long? Those sorts of things.
So I was going to say, actually, then, if we move on to the financial services, it's largely the same in terms of how they need to meet compliance. They're just sharing different data. You've got, in the finance industry, you've got standards like PCI DSS, you've got SOX, more recently you've got DORA. So yeah, is it sort of, they need MFT to do virtually the same thing, it's just they're sharing a different kind of sensitive data around?
Yeah, so the financial services sector has been really at the forefront, I guess, or financial services in general banking, has been at the forefront of file transfer pretty much since its inception. And they're still sitting on a lot of older, one might argue, legacy systems that they're working with. They do have more compliance mandates and regulations for their industry, and rightly so. The breaching of a healthcare organisation may be bad for the individuals whose healthcare data has been breached. You breach a bank, and then a certain section of the economy might fail. So the impact is somewhat bigger. Yeah. Therefore, I think realistically the regulations and the compliance need to be tighter. So that's why you see things like PCI DSS and DORA in place. PCI DSS looking specifically at a set of regulations around organisations. It's not just the banking sector. This applies to anybody that's transacting effectively financial transactions. The PCI DSS piece is fundamental to the whole of the business that operates within that industry as well. So it's not just that it affects the data that is for financial transactions at that point. It's a whole framework for the organisation. DORA's an interesting one in so much that it is really looking at the resilience of those organisations. So I think the financial services industry and banking are very, very aware that there's a lot of focus on them from the point of view of organisations wanting to get access to them, to their systems, to their data, to the money. Yeah. And DORA specifically, and paraphrasing it, an awful lot, is there to look at the resiliency of the organisations and that industry, so that if something was to happen, then the industry is as well structured, as well managed, and they've considered the availability of their systems as much as possible, so they shouldn't in theory fall over. So rightly regulated and with strong compliance in that sector. Fundamentally, though, same sort of things as we're talking about with healthcare in terms of the features that are important. We've got to be securing the data in transit. We've got to be really careful about who has access to that data as well. Yeah. Regardless, really, of industry sector, the the features and functionalities are much the same from one business to the next. And really, we've a model. We've talked about zero trust in the past. This is really a model that should be adopted by all organisations from the point of view of the hacking and breaches is certainly on the rise. We would recommend this approach to any business in any sector to help them to achieve the compliance that they need to achieve.
Yeah, I feel like retail itself has come under a lot of fire recently with breaches, and not necessarily for their file transfer, but I know retail, you might not necessarily think it's a highly regulated space, but actually there's a lot goes on behind the scenes of retail. Another industry I've noticed we are starting to see more of is the sort of military and defence industry. And I know a couple of customers have come to the team around ITAR compliant file transfer, and I just wondered if you had much knowledge on ITAR compliant file transfer, or what you can share about that.
Yeah, you're right. ITAR is becoming more and more prevalent for us. We have a number of customers in the defence sector that have to adhere to ITAR. So ITAR is a US standard. It stands for the International Traffic in Arms regulations, and really, we're talking about another type of very sensitive information here, and a very sensitive industry. So again, there's no surprise that there are some very stringent compliance and mandates for this particular industry sector. Driven out of the US, as a lot of the compliance regulations are. But this one very much does flow down through international organizations, whereas HIPAA, not so much so, not necessarily adopted internationally. ITAR is adopted internationally for defense organizations. It places a lot more stringent controls on processes, on people, on data sovereignty. You'll see specific to what we do, obviously, from an MFT or either as on-premises or SaaS solutions or hosted solutions. The data residency is a really important thing for ITAR. So you now have, if you look at the big three hosting providers, they all have ITAR compliant hosting infrastructure. So that's something that is hugely important. Not a lot of people necessarily know, but the defence sector and those sort of critical infrastructure organisations don't necessarily always move the data over the internet either. They have their own private managed networks for moving data. So that then helps to achieve compliance by them not being exposed to a lot of different, I guess, attack vectors would be a good way of looking at it. Other things, I was looking at this just this morning, because ITIL is not something I read about every day, but verification processes. So if I'm a bank, maybe not necessarily the best example, but let's say I'm in retail and I'm wanting to exchange data with a trading partner or supplier, the likelihood is I'll know who that supplier is as an organization, and I'll get their credentials to be able to exchange data with them. ITAR is very much different in terms of there's a strict verification process for organizations. So you wouldn't necessarily be building out trading partners on a platform straight away with just details that have been emailed over the internet or something of that nature. And naturally there is a greater degree of sensitivity and within that particular industry sector, and as a consequence, things don't move particularly quickly either. This is not a case of I need to be able to get exchanging data very quickly between two organizations. This is I need to be uber sensitive and secure, one, because of a regulatory approach to it, and two, because of the sensitivity of what it is, we need to make sure that every single box is ticked and double ticked and triple ticked. Yeah.
So do you think organizations need to consider who they choose as their solution provider when it comes to their compliance requirements?
It depends.
We love that phrase.
We do love it. It depends. Depends what sort of file transfers we're talking about. So slightly going off piste here, sort of a subset of MFT is that person-to-person file sharing. There are some great products out there that really hone in on the compliance capabilities So if I'm wanting to send a sensitive piece of data to you, obviously it doesn't want to go as an email attachment, but it's an attachment offloading process that's data sits securely, and then you're accessing it via the secure platform, and you're tracking and auditing and logging, all that sort of good stuff. And there's features that make their way into those platforms that are very specific to particular compliance framework, should we say. So you can very much, so you're wanting to select a platform for that particular type of sending in an ad hoc fashion data around. There are some great platforms for that. Yeah. Some of them have got compliance modules and compliance centers, and they really hone in on that. When it comes to choosing an MFT solution, the way an analogy I use when I'm talking about MFT solutions is they're all like cars. They've all got four wheels, unless you're driving a Reliant, I guess, but that's going off on a tangent. They've all got four wheels. They've all got a windshield or a windscreen. They've all got rear views. They all roughly do the same thing. Yeah. I always suggest that it's the nuances, the slighter details is the reason why you're choosing a particular platform. I guess the same, by extension, the same is true with regards to compliance. So does the product in itself address compliance? Well, yes and no. I mean, there are features in some of them that allude to the fact that they help with compliance, but fundamentally, if they're securing the data exchanges and reporting on it and all the other good things that we know they do, then they sort of tick the box to sort of become a part of that compliance process for the organization. But really, I think as part of that selection process, the organization, so the customer or the end user who's looking to buy one of these solutions probably needs to look a little bit deeper. So is the software vendor, are they compliant with whatever regulations might be required for software vendors? So for example, if it's a hosted solution, SOC 2 and all sorts of SaaS different compliance regulations that are absolutely mandated. And if we go back to ITAR, there are products that are specifically hosted in, certainly in the US, FedRAMP environments like an ITAR compliant environment, hosting environment. So there's lots of different ways in which you can look at the selection of a product depending upon what compliance is appropriate for you as an organization, but also have a look at the compliance that the software vendor is following as well. Are they just developing the software and putting it out to the marketplace, or are they sort of taking their own advice and becoming as compliant as they possibly can be, where it's appropriate, of course?
That's a good point. Do you feel that there's anywhere organisations fall short when it comes to compliance, and where they think they're meeting it and they might not be?
I think there's organisations have a false sense of security that they're compliant in a lot of instances. I think compliance is a massive can of worms. Lots of different avenues we could go down with it, but fundamentally, if the solution is deployed in as secure a manner as possible, then you are pretty much doing as much as you can to be compliant in pretty much any industry and under any compliance and regulatory framework. And to that, then I'd come back to the point that I made a bit earlier. Our zero trust model, or the zero trust model, any zero trust model to MFT, is probably the approach to take. The way it's deployed and configured, who has access to it, both externally and internally, what happens with the data. None of these things are necessarily new for MFT, but maybe organizations that are running MFT solutions might have deployed a solution and not necessarily given it the scrutiny that it might well need. So I'd potentially suggest that they go back and fully scrutinize what it is they have in place and look at it from a zero trust perspective, and also another shameless plug, get them to look at our maturity model as well. Yes. Certainly if you're in a financial services organization, you're thinking about DORA and resilience, then if you think about maturity, you don't have a single server, you've got to have multiple instances for high availability and those sorts of good things. So
yeah. I feel like you've kind of just checked off my last question to you, which was going to be sort of someone listening wondering whether they may have gaps in their own setup, what should they do first? But I think you've plugged that quite nicely.
I might have done a little bit of a plug there. Yeah, so,
anything else to add to that, or?
Probably not, no. I mean, it's a complicated
quite a lot.
topic. It's not the most interesting of topics either.
What are you talking about?
Compliance.
No, it's been really helpful, and you breaking it down and the industries, I think, will be incredibly useful. So, yeah, thank you, James, as always. Very big thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Steph.
And a very big thank you to our listeners. As I say, if you are sat there thinking you may have gaps in your own systems and want to talk it through, please use the contact details in the show notes below. As always, please like and subscribe, and we shall see you in the next episode.